Vampire Lord, Trail of Terror, Part 4, written and read by Tony Capobianco. The moon bathed the world in a cold, ethereal light, as Agent Castabello's heart and mind raced in unison with the car he drove. The gruesome tableau of the crime scene replayed unbidden, a macabre parade of images that haunted him with relentless persistence. The stark, lifeless bodies of victims, their blood a vivid, haunting presence, seemed to cling to him, an aftertaste as repugnant and clinging as the memory of vomit, yet far more harrowing. Miles from the scene, the horror remained vivid, a spectral presence that matched the frenetic pace of his heart. Consumed by the trauma, Castabello drove on autopilot, a testament to the mind's capacity to function amidst turmoil. The dark, desolate highways of Pennsylvania offered no respite, each passing headlight a momentary assault, exacerbating his sensory overload. His heart hammered, sweat beaded on his skin, and a suffocating dread threatened to overwhelm him. The proximity of oblivion felt all too real. The potential end of everything he knew loomed. No more duty, no more mysteries, no more battles against the dark. Amidst the panic, a grounding thought, Lydia Marsh, his partner, was beside him. Even in his darkest moment, her safety remained his beacon. His mind was a battlefield of fear, each moment conjuring vivid, gruesome foresights of their demise. Suddenly, his thoughts were hijacked by the malevolent visage of the master vampire, whose demonic presence haunted the periphery of his mind. One moment he'd see a victim from the mall. The next he'd confront the master's demonic face, its putrid breath mingling with the metallic scent of blood from the night's crime scene, weaving a tapestry of terror that mercilessly besieged him. The cold sweat was unrelenting, his breathing labored, as if each breath brought less air. Marsh, sensing his distress, turned to him, her voice lost to him in his state of panic. Frantically, he toggled his focus between Marsh and the road, struggling against the quicksand grip of his spiraling thoughts, feeling trapped in a metallic tomb of his own making. Engulfed by the grip of his panic, the world around Agent Castabello fell eerily silent, save for a high-pitched buzzing that seemed to scream inside his head, reminiscent of an alien parasite's shriek. A fleeting glance in the rearview mirror made him believe he saw a ghostly pale face, shrouded in black, trailing behind them, its features as finely chiseled as if by a master sculptor's hand in moonlit granite. Rationalizing this vision as a trick of his fraught mind, vampires, after all, had no reflection. He momentarily found solace before panic surged back with renewed ferocity. As the moon's light waned, obscured by encroaching clouds, darkness enveloped them, the atmosphere turning oppressively heavy and cold. This tense silence shattered abruptly with the sound of breaking glass. Shards from the moonroof rained down like lethal, jagged hail, one slicing across Castabello's cheek, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. Simultaneously, Lydia Marsh was seized and lifted through the shattered moonroof by immense pale arms. Suspended above the car, her body writhed in primal panic, her mind unable to process the peril. Swallowed by darkness as clouds hid the moon, Marsh felt the unyielding grip of large hands, her struggles futile against the creature's overpowering strength. Castabello, reacting instinctively, slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt. Unlatching his seatbelt, he burst from the vehicle, his heart racing, gasping for air, his concern for Marsh propelling him to search the night sky. Then the master's sinister voice pierced the night. "Ha ha 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 ha! You really are pathetic. Look at you. Your fear has utterly consumed you, and before this night is through, I will consume you. Every last drop of your terror-infested blood will be mine. What a delicious feast it shall be!"
"Let her go. Just take me and let her go,"
Castabello shakily pleaded. The master's response was cruel and mocking. "Let her go? Ha ha! You really are as dumb as you are pathetic. You have nothing to trade. I possess both of you. Oh yes, you both belong to me. I own you in every way. We are going to play a game. If you can survive long enough, I'll reward you with seeing Marsh again and witnessing her ultimate fate. Her destiny is set. Will you live long enough to see it, vampire hunter?" He hovered ominously above the road. Castabello's anger flared.
"Enough with your twisted games. Put Marsh down and fight me face to face."
The vampire lord sneered, setting the terms of their dark game. "All in due time. To get your foolish wish, all you have to do is enter the forest and find us. Ha 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 ha! Oh yes, there's one more thing. You'll have to fight my progeny to reach me." With that, he disappeared into the forest with Marsh. Castabello fell to his knees, overwhelmed by a maelstrom of emotions. Then, as a mysterious fog rolled in, a calm voice, perhaps imagined, offered guidance.
"Calm down. You are not alone. Practice mindfulness. Focus on the moment."
Heeding the voice, Castabello found a semblance of peace. The urgent need to rescue Marsh pushed his anxiety aside, his training and resolve cutting through the fog of fear as he peered into the dark forest, determined to save his partner. Deprived of his telekinetic Kaibo powers, an unforeseen setback, Castabello recognized the grim odds of his endeavor. Even at the height of his abilities, challenging the immortal master was a daunting task. The master stood apart from other vampires, impervious to traditional methods of destruction like sunlight or a stake through the heart, his dominion over the vampire kin absolute. Yet, driven by duty and compassion, Castabello felt an unwavering resolve to attempt a rescue of Marsh, knowing she would risk the same for him. He rationalized that his mission didn't hinge on defeating the vampire lord outright, but on liberating Marsh, providing her a chance to escape. This potential sacrifice seemed a worthy trade in his mind, despite the profound grief it would cause his team. He believed they would eventually find a way to move forward, with Marsh capably filling the void of his absence. With only his sidearm, Castabello faced the dark forest, a realization dawning on him that such conventional weaponry was ineffectual against his supernatural foes. He approached the trunk of the car with determined strides, retrieving a crossbow and wooden stakes, along with a headlamp intended solely for dire circumstances. Its light would betray his presence, stripping him of the element of surprise. As he stepped into the forest, the overcast sky mercifully parted, allowing moonbeams to pierce the canopy, casting an otherworldly glow through the mist, a phenomenon all too familiar in his encounters with vampires and other supernatural creatures. His eyes, now adept at navigating this spectral landscape, scanned the surroundings. With each cautious step deeper into the woods, the silence was palpable, as if the forest itself recoiled in the presence of something sinister. Castabello surmised that the natural inhabitants had fled, instinctively aware of the malevolent forces at play, reaffirming the unnatural disturbance the vampire lord and his minions brought to these woods. Treading lightly, Castabello moved with utmost care, keenly aware any misstep could reveal his presence in the dense, fog-laden woods, a challenging endeavor even in broad daylight, let alone under the veil of night. His thoughts momentarily wandered to his team back at Moon Mist headquarters, stirring a mix of relief and longing within him. The thought of having Adam and Annabelle by his side brought a certain comfort despite the peril. Before venturing into the forest's depths, he had made contact with headquarters, though he was well aware that any backup would arrive long after dawn. In his heart, he knew their absence was a blessing in disguise. The night's earlier events had seen too many law enforcement officers fall to the master and his protege, dubbed the Mall Deathstalker, during the mall assault. The grim outcome of that confrontation had made it abundantly clear that a direct confrontation with the vampire lord, especially on his chosen ground, would likely end in disaster. The memory of their failed trap for the fledgling vampire, once a mortal but notorious serial killer, loomed large in his mind. That encounter, meant to be a strategic strike, had devolved into chaos once the vampire lord intervened, transforming the scene into a horrific massacre. Determined to avoid repeat of such carnage, Castabello preferred to face the danger alone rather than risk his team. He harbored a slim hope that, perhaps with a stroke of fortune, he might eliminate many vampires before meeting his end. The idea of evening the score, of turning the hunters into the hunted, and orchestrating his own vampire bloodbath, however fanciful, brought a grim smile to his face. Such a turn of events, however unlikely, would offer a semblance of retribution for the night's earlier tragedies. As Lydia Marsh was whisked through the night sky by the vampire lord, she felt as vulnerable as a rabbit in the clutches of an eagle, the cold air at their altitude intensifying her discomfort and fear. The enveloping darkness seemed to amplify her terror, the realization of being utterly at the mercy of this malevolent force, rendering her feeling powerless and out of control. This loss of agency, coupled with the chilling darkness, sent waves of dread coursing through her. Despite her unwavering trust in Castabello, Lydia couldn't fathom how he might rescue her from this dire situation. Only moments before her abduction, he had been nearly incapacitated by a severe panic attack. And now, with the vampire lord's sudden and violent intervention, her prospects seemed bleak. The uncertainty of Castabello's fate loomed over her. The mere possibility of his death was unbearable to contemplate, for his loss would not only be a personal blow, but a significant setback in their fight against the vampire menace. The Master's ancient power and dominion posed an insurmountable challenge, one that Lydia feared was beyond the capabilities of Moon Mist Division, even more so in Castabello's current state, stripped of his Kaibo powers. Yet, she had harbored an almost irrational belief in his eventual resurgence, clinging to the hope that his restored abilities would tip the scales in their battle against the dark. In her heart, Lydia knew that her hope for overcoming the vampire lord was intricately tied to Castabello's survival. His end would symbolize the extinguishing of their last flicker of hope against the encroaching darkness. Lydia's mind was a whirlwind of dread and confusion as she pondered the vampire lord's motives. The question of why she and Kono had been spared thus far gnawed at her, fueling her fear. Was their fate to be turned into vampires, their bodies to become vessels for dark riders, as per some macabre plan? And if so, why had the master delayed their transformation, opting instead to transport her to this unknown location? Her racing thoughts were abruptly interrupted as they began a swift descent, the biting chill of the air easing as they neared the ground. The sight that greeted her, a campfire illuminating the darkness, its orange glow a stark contrast against the night, confirmed her worst fears. The vampire lord's minions had prepared the site, indicating a level of premeditation that sent shivers down her spine. The realization that the night's events were part of a larger, sinister scheme tightened the knot of anxiety in her stomach, her sense of dread mounting with each passing moment. Yet Lydia was resolute in her defiance. She would not allow the vampire lord the pleasure of seeing her fear. Determined not to resemble a worm wriggling helplessly on a hook before a ravenous predator. This resolve to mask her terror, to maintain a semblance of control in a situation where she had little, provided a surprising solace. This small act of defiance, though seemingly insignificant, provided her with a sliver of comfort and a flicker of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. When they came within 10 yards of the forest floor, the cruel undead beast threw her to the ground with violence. The force of the impact knocked the air out of her. Her long dark hair, wild from the flight, hid the expression of trouble on her face. Before she could regain her senses after the fall, and consider making a run for it, a pair of cold hands grasped her from behind, holding her arms behind her back. The vampire moved his head close to hers, pressed against her hair, and his filthy lips grazed her right ear and whispered, "Hey there, pretty eyes. Remember me?" Lydia's blood ran cold as her stomach lurched. An icy cold river flowed down her spine as gooseflesh rose on her arms and the back of her neck. The voice belonged to the Mall Death Stalker. "Good! Good!" the master gleefully exclaimed as he snorted through his nose, inhaling her scent like a voracious wolf. He continued, "There's the fear I've been waiting for. You'll taste amazing with such fear raging through your warm veins. Believe me, the fear has only just begun." Lydia took a deep breath and tried to compose herself. She had tried to calm down. She was angry with herself for allowing her fear and emotions to take over and break through her stoic facade. "Yes, Master, you are so very right. You're always very right. She smells like fear, and it's driving me mad. I want her, and I want her now," the Mall Deathstalker said as he knocked Lydia back to the ground and thrust himself on top of her. The vampire lord, moving so quickly that it appeared as a blur to human eyes, grabbed his fledgling, yanked him back, and effortlessly threw him 20 yards away as he snarled, "No, not yet!" The fledgling crashed into a tree. Lydia snickered and said,
"Poor Dylan Rottenborn, a loser in life and an impotent loser in death. You never were, and you'll never be the alpha male you desperately wished to be. You're just a lowly, submissive beta."
Rottenborn, the now undead Mall Deathstalker, was consumed with rage, but he didn't dare to defy his new master, so he snarled in the shadows. The master pointed to 2 female vampires and commanded, "Tie the mortal girl up to that tree, but first take off her clothes and put her into this red dress." The female vampires did as they were told, and Lydia was powerless to stop them. Once tied to the tree, she defiantly stared into the flames of the campfire. She envisioned herself breaking free and tossing Dylan Rottenborn into the burning fire. Castabello pressed on through the dense, mist-shrouded forest, his crossbow poised and ready, his senses heightened to their utmost. The stillness of the night air was palpable, each shadow and sound magnified in the eerie quiet. A shaft of moonlight betrayed the presence of a vampire lurking near a tree, its pallid face momentarily illuminated. Castabello, with practiced stealth, sank to the forest floor, shrouded in fog, hoping to turn the tables on his supernatural stalker. As the vampire abandoned its cover to search for him, Castabello seized the opportunity, his crossbow bolt finding its mark. The creature's death throes, a burst of flame and a piercing scream, marked the first victory of the night. Yet this was but the beginning. The distant cacophony of enraged vampires signaled that his intrusion had not gone unnoticed. The forest was alive with the sounds of his adversaries, their cries a haunting reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. Another figure caught his eye, a hooded shape that vanished with unnerving speed, stirring the fog in its wake. Castabello suspected the vampire lord, the only being capable of such velocity. The possibility of a trap weighed heavily on his mind, yet he knew he had little alternative but to continue. Marsh's safety was his paramount concern, and every instinct urged him forward, deeper into the heart of darkness. Rising cautiously, Castabello advanced, each step heavy with foreboding. Despite his resolve, a sense of fatalism clung to him, an undercurrent of dread that he struggled to dispel. Alerted by the rustle of swift footsteps, Castabello spun, crossbow raised, just in time to confront a blonde-haired vampire charging towards him. Her eyes, wild with bloodlust, locked onto his as she bore down. With practiced precision, he released the bolt, watching as it sailed through the air and struck true, piercing her heart. The vampire's scream pierced the night as she disintegrated into ash, her demise as swift as her attack. But victory was short-lived. Another assailant, a vampire with fiery red locks, lunged at him from the shadows, knocking the crossbow from his grasp. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, her feral snarls filling his ears. As she raised her claws to strike, Castabello's hand found the wooden stake at his belt. In a desperate gambit, he positioned it just as she descended upon him. Her own momentum drove the stake through her heart, her body erupting into flames before vanishing into the night. Breathing heavily, Castabello rose, the adrenaline of the skirmish still coursing through his veins. But the sense of triumph was fleeting, evaporating as he surveyed the scene before him. Emerging from the fog was a legion of vampires, their numbers far surpassing what he had anticipated. They moved with eerie coordination, encircling him with deliberate, menacing steps. The foggy forest floor offered no cover, no shadow to conceal him. He was exposed, vulnerable. As the vampires closed in, a palpable sense of despair settled over Castabello. Despite his skills and the victories he had just claimed, the sea of advancing undead was a force beyond reckoning. He was an insect caught in a web, the spiders closing in. His resolve crumbled further as he contemplated his failure to protect Marsh, the weight of her potential fate a burden he could scarcely bear. She, who deserved so much more than the cruelty of this dark world, was now intertwined with his own uncertain destiny. As the circle of bloodsuckers got within 5 yards of him, a blonde-haired vampire with pigtails walked toward him and slapped him across his face. Then, a brown-haired male vampire punched him in his gut, causing Castabello to hunch over. Next, a red-headed female vampire stepped forward and scratched his face. Blood dripped out of the opened wound. It didn't stop there. The blows kept on coming. The vampire's assault continued, each blow a stark reminder of his dire situation. They reveled in his pain, their jeers cutting deeper than their physical attacks. Castabello, once a hunter feared by the creatures of the night, was reduced to a plaything for their cruel amusement. A large male vampire with a buzz cut leapt toward him and punched his stomach. This time the crushing blow had broken ribs. Castabello collapsed to the ground in pain. Breathing became very difficult. These sadistic, undead creatures felt and exhibited no mercy. To the contrary, each and every one of them seemed to gain more pleasure as Castabello felt more pain. One after another, the kicks, slaps, scratches, and punches continued as they savagely beat him to a bloody pulp. The violence was accompanied by humiliating taunts. They jeered him and mocked him as the great vampire hunter, the chosen one. After what seemed like an eternity, they stopped. The mob of vampires dragged the severely beaten Castabello before the vampire lord. Beneath a veil of blood and sweat that clouded his vision, Castabello lay defeated, his body sprawled across the forest floor like discarded refuse. Through the haze of his concussed state, he glimpsed the sinister silhouettes of the vampires that had just subjected him to a brutal onslaught. Across the fire pit, the vampire lord stood, the embers swirling around him like demonic snowflakes, painting a nightmarish scene befitting what Castabello's gut screamed was his own funeral pyre. The moon, previously a sliver of hope in the darkness, was now shrouded by clouds, leaving only the fire's flickering light to pierce the overwhelming darkness. The pain from his broken ribs mingled with the suffocating cloak of despair, a physical manifestation of the panic attack that had gripped him earlier, now made manifest in his battered form. The elite leader of an FBI team, once proud and confident, had been reduced to a shell of his former self, broken in body, mind, and spirit. Lydia's voice pierced the heavy silence, her words a mix of concern and disbelief.
Kono, dear Lord, what have they done to you?
The sound of her voice was a cruel reminder of his failure, his inability to fulfill the sole mission that had driven him into the heart of darkness, to save her. Dragging his heavy, battered body onto his knees, Castabello's gaze fell upon Marsh, tied to a tree, a spectacle of despair framed by encroaching vampires. Rottenborn's presence, smirking beside her with his grotesque vampire fangs bared, was a sight that twisted the knife of failure deeper into Castabello's heart. The events of the mall massacre, now seemingly a lifetime ago, played in his mind, a cruel reminder of the relentless passage of time and the fleeting nature of hope. With a voice rasped by pain and defeat, Castabello uttered,
Lydia. Lydia! I'm so sorry. I failed you. I wanted to save you, but I failed you again.
His words were a barely audible whisper, lost in the crackle of the fire and the mocking jeers of the vampires. The vampire lord's mocking laughter cut through the night, his voice dripping with malice as he taunted. "Welcome to the party, exalted vampire hunter. I told you that it would end this way. It never could have ended any other way. Your fates were inevitable. The mighty Kaibo warrior, look at you now. Pathetic. You writhe on the ground like the worm that you are. You are so unbelievably weak. You weren't able to defeat but a few of my minions. Even more embarrassing, you couldn't even wield your Kaibo powers. What an impotent excuse for a man you are! These words, each one laced with venom, were a searing pain to Castabello, amplifying the agony of his physical wounds and the torment of his spirit. The cumulative weight of his defeats, from Bat Cave to the Mall, and now this final devastating blow, played before his eyes like a macabre film, each scene a testament to his perceived inadequacies and failures. In this moment, as Castabello faced the mocking visage of the Vampire Lord and the captive figure of Marsh, he was consumed by a profound sense of despair, his spirit crushed under the weight of his perceived failures and the looming shadow of an unstoppable evil. The black hole born of a supernova of exploding emotions raged within Castabello. Just when pain morphed into anger and anger mutated into apathy, the diabolical Vampire Lord spoke. You are mere sustenance for the gods, yet I offer you ascension, the Vampire Lord intoned, his voice a dark melody of temptation and deceit. Swear fealty to me, embrace my tutelage, and the power you've longed for will be yours. The choice lies before you. Perish under the Red Flame's wrath, or rise as a pillar of its empire. Castabello, still on his knees, stared vacantly at the unforgiving ground. His apathetic response, born from a well of despair, echoed the futility of resistance.
What does it matter?
He countered, the weight of inevitable defeat pressing upon him.
The end remains unchanged. You or your psychopathic serial killer vampire follower will kill Marsh, and darkness will consume the world. Nothing matters anymore.
The Master, closing the distance, presented a chilling ultimatum. Your partner's fate remains in your hands. He whispered, a sinister promise veiled as mercy. Reject me, and she will become a vessel for a dark rider, a vampire. Accept, and you might yet save her life. The Master licked his lips and continued to speak in his serpentine manner. We will devour the world. Nothing can stop that now. Candidly, I don't wish to kill her. My desire, should you reject my offer to submit, is to command Mr. Rottenborn to bite her, drain her of her blood, and open her mortal body to a dark rider. At the point of death, her body would die, her spirit would eject into the spirit realm, and a sinister spirit that has never walked the earth in the flesh would possess her new vampire body and serve me. Besides that, you are wrong about another thing. Power always matters. So, what will it be, Kaibo? Will you fulfill your mission and save your fragile friend by vowing allegiance to me? Or will you fail one final time and cause Marsh to become the victim of the Mall Death Stalker? Marsh's tearful pleas, desperate and raw, cut through the night.
Resist him, Kono,
she implored, her voice a beacon of truth in the sea of lies.
Don't listen to that devil. Don't let him twist your mind. He's a liar. He cannot be trusted. Kono, please don't join him. I'd rather die than see you become the thing you hate. Don't you dare become his vampire slave.
Gently placing his right hand on Castabello's shoulder, the Vampire Lord spoke again. Kono, making you a vampire is not the plan. No, I desire that you remain a human. As my disciple, I will teach you to finally harness the real potential of your abilities. Out of his pocket, the manipulative vampire lord took out an ornate golden amulet with a large, spectacular red crystal in the center and dangled it inches before Castabello's face. Engraved in Dracunan were the words, "Dark Energy," and at the bottom, "Red Flame." Continuing to speak, the master said, "With this amulet of power, I will bestow upon you the kind of power that kings and queens dream of. When I train you to use and align your Kaibo powers with the red flame, you'll be able to protect your sweet Lydia. In service to me, you'll be transformed from a failure into a successful legend whom history shall never forget. Join us, serve me, and you can at last save Lydia and become the powerful Kaibo warrior you were destined to be. What say you, Kaibo? What will it be?" An amazing thing happened as the red amulet of power swung back and forth like the pendulum of a clock. Castabello's blurry vision began to clear, and beyond that, he could feel a tremendous power emanating from the red crystal. It was a surge of power, unlike anything he had ever sensed before. Instantly, a rage swelled inside of him. The unbridled anger mutated into an unadulterated hatred. An urge to conquer and destroy surged within him. The world around him rapidly faded away. In an instant, all that remained was anger and power. In this new acute state, fear seemed impossible. If he remained like this, he would not be anxious or afraid ever again. With this power, he would be the one instilling fear and conjuring panic in all those that defied him. Wearing a self-satisfied smirk, the master added, "Yes, let the power wash over you. This amulet of power once belonged to a legendary Kaibo ancestor of yours who served the Red Flame and the Red Emperor, the one ruler of the darkness. Join me, and I'll teach you the true history of your ancestors." Marsh futilely struggled to break free from the ropes that restrained her as she yelled,
No, Kono, no! Don't listen to him. He serves the Dark Lord. He serves the darkness, and he will make the world dark as night, forever.
As Marsh said those words, Dylan Rottenborn put his hands on her shoulders and flashed his fangs. It was a clear message for both Marsh and Castabello. The vampire lord snickered at Marsh's desperate plea and replied, "Young Kaibo, Marsh is ignorant. We do not serve the darkness." The ancient master vampire gazed into the campfire. "We belong to the Red Flame. In fact, the Red Flame is the light that illuminates the darkness and beats it back. Its glorious embers burn through worlds and afterwards brings peace and stability. The sacred Red Flame is eternal. It's a beacon of light, sometimes blinding, but always consuming. Let it consume you. Let it consume this world, and finally bring order out of the chaos of its present darkness." The words of the vampire lord were strangely seductive. Castabello had always wanted to bring peace. For months he had wished to have his Kaibo powers restored. Perhaps most of all, he had desperately desired to rescue Marsh, and now, even after his total defeat, he was being offered a way to achieve what he most desired. The anger that continued to swirl like a hurricane within him made the master's offer nearly irresistible. As the storm of anger and desire raged inside of Castabello, threatening to swallow him, the foreign female voice that he had heard earlier that night returned.
Take a breath. Next, take a deep breath. Focus only on your breathing. The current moment is all that matters. It's the only thing that's real. Past and future are illusions that distract from the reality of the present. Keep breathing. Center yourself. Good. That's good. Now you know who you really are, and you know that you aren't alone.
The raging ocean swells of anger stilled, and Castabello felt a deep sense of peace. Love and empathy replaced the intoxicating negative emotions that had taken him over. As he rose to his feet, a powerful wind roared through the forest, swaying the trees and blowing away the clouds and fog. Empowered by his newfound clarity, Castabello stood tall, a defiant figure against the backdrop of encroaching shadows.
No.
He declared, his voice a bastion of resistance.
I reject your offer and all that your red flame represents. I will never serve you. Go to hell.
With a determined and defiant look in his eyes, Agent Castabello glared at the vampire lord and said,
No, I will not join you, and I will never serve you or your red flame.
As soon as Castabello finished making his final declaration, a blur passed by him, and suddenly Marsh's ropes dropped to the ground. The vampire lord unleashed a deafening, guttural growl, and then said, "Fools! Now you shall both perish, and your bodies will become vessels for the most wicked dark riders!" As Rottenborn charged at Marsh, he was knocked backwards a solid 30 yards. To the eyes of Castabello and Marsh, it looked like a streaking black shadow had raced toward the notorious serial killer vampire. Nearly simultaneously, Marsh inexplicably held a wooden stake in her right hand. Confused and enraged, the mauled Deathstalker sprinted toward Marsh, and as he lunged at her, she thrust the wooden stake straight through his cold heart. The psychopathic vampire immediately erupted into flames, and then Marsh kicked him straight into the campfire. That was the final end of Rottenborn. As the vampire lord lurched to grab Castabello, the dark shadow streaked in front of him, ripped the red amulet from the sinister fiend, and simultaneously struck him with unimaginable force. The master had been blasted backwards about 20 yards. The blow had been so strong that the undead tyrant would certainly have traveled an additional 30 yards backwards if he hadn't crashed into a massive oak tree. Furious, the vampire lord commanded his vampire army to kill them all. The shadowy figure streaked towards a male vampire and came to a stop inches from the undead fiend's face. The dark-haired Latino vampire punched the black-cloaked figure in its face, but the mysterious figure's head never even turned. The male vampire cocked his arm to deliver a massive roundhouse punch, but before it could, the hooded figure did something extraordinary. It punched through the vampire's ribcage, ripped out its heart, and impaled it on a tree branch. Open ribcage and all, the vampire exploded. The rest of the vampire army rushed the mysterious stranger, but they each burst into flames or blew up in rapid succession. The mysterious figure had thrown wooden daggers through the hearts of each and every vampire minion. The stranger had thrown the daggers with such speed that Castabello and Marsh had thought that the mysterious stranger had powers of telekinesis and immolation. The destruction leveled by the hooded figure was staggering. Its power was immense. Neither Castabello nor Marsh had ever witnessed any supernatural creature wield such powers except for the Master. The hooded stranger turned their attention once again to the Master. The vampire lord scowled at the stranger and growled fiercely. As the indomitable vampire left his feet and flew through the air toward his new foe responded in kind. The hooded figure, flying through the air at great speed, drove the sinister fiend through a massive tree. The sound of the wood cracking, then breaking, thundered throughout the dark forest. The vampire lord, taken aback, rose to his feet and punched the figure as hard as he could. The force of the blow knocked the hooded figure back 25 yards. Rushing in to finish the hooded figure off, the master flew through the air again. The hooded figure reached into their black robe and slung several wooden daggers at the undead terror. The first dagger spiked into the fiend's head. The second and third daggers pierced deep into his shoulders. Screeching in pain, the ancient vampire plummeted to the ground. When he looked up, he saw the face of his unexpected foe. There was a look of recognition. The distinct expression of fear washed over his face. Surprised, scared, and wounded, the vampire lord leapt off of his feet, flew, and disappeared into the night sky. As the remnants of battle settled around them, Castabello and Marsh, still ensnared by the night's ordeal, watched apprehensively as their enigmatic savior approached. The tension hung palpable in the air, the echoes of chaos lingering as a stark reminder of the peril they had just endured. This lone figure, whose unforeseen intervention had shifted the fate of the night, now stood as the final act in a saga marked by turbulence and uncertainty. With a measured grace that seemed to stretch the fabric of time itself, the figure reached up, unveiling their true self beneath the cloak of mystery. The visage revealed was strikingly incongruent with the ferocity they had wielded in battle. A young woman, her features sculpted in ethereal beauty, framed by cascades of silken black hair. She bore the semblance of youth, yet her poised demeanor spoke of a timeless essence, a spirit sculpted by epics of unseen struggles. Her steady gaze, imbued with an intensity that belied her serene exterior, locked with theirs, conveying an unspoken understanding of the myriad questions swirling in their minds. The depth in her azure eyes seemed to bridge worlds, whispering of ancient sagas and the silent vigil she had kept over the shadowed corners of history. As the silence enveloped them, her voice, a harbinger of hope and unseen alliances, pierced the stillness, heralding the dawn of a new chapter in their ongoing battle against the flames of evil threatening to devour their world.
Hi, I am Athena, Queen of the Illumidaco.
Thanks for stopping by the haunted Half Moon Inn. I hope that you have enjoyed your stay. Before you go, please put a wooden stake through the like button and leave a comment for the spirits to read. If you did enjoy your time with us, subscribe to this undead channel. Doing those little things really helps me to reach more souls. The world is sick and hurting. It needs more horror. Help me to heal the world through horror. Together, we can haunt this world one home at a time. And always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there.